They say confession is good for the soul. They never mention what happens when the priest is already damned. Elena Marino learned that truth on a Thursday night in Little Italy, where the neon signs bled red onto wet pavement and the espresso tasted like burnt promises. She was 26 years old, working her second double shift of the week at Angelo's Corner, a diner that smelled perpetually of floor wax and regret. The tips were terrible. The customers were worse. But the rent was due, and her brother Marco's inhaler prescription cost more than her weekly take-home, so she smiled through the ache in her feet and pretended the world wasn't crushing her one plate of lukewarm pasta at a time. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered in rhythm with her headache. 10 hours into her shift, Elena counted crumpled singles at the corner of the counter, her fingers stained with marinara sauce and the residue of broken dreams. $47. Not enough for the pharmacy copay, not enough for the overdue electric bill, not enough for anything except another sleepless night wondering how long she could keep this up before something gave way. The bell above the door chimed sharp and insistent, pulling her attention to booth 4, where an elderly woman sat trembling, her hands pushing away a plate of biscotti like it carried poison. The woman was small, frail, with hair like spun silver and eyes that looked lost in a fog only she could see. A bodyguard in an expensive suit stood beside the booth, his jaw tight with frustration, his phone pressed to his ear. The manager, Frank, a sweaty man with a comb-over and a gambling problem, rushed over his hands, raised in placating gestures that meant nothing. Elena had seen this before. Dementia. Her grandmother had died the same way, fading into a world where the past swallowed the present whole. The old woman's voice rose, cracking with panic. Dove Antonio voglio tornare a casa. Where is Antonio? I want to go home. The words hit Elena like a fist to the chest, not because of what they meant, but because of how they sounded. Sicilian dialect. The old kind. The kind her Nonna Giulia used to speak in the kitchen while kneading dough, her voice low and melodic, wrapping secrets in flour and olive oil. Elena's feet moved before her brain caught up, carrying her past Frank's protests, past the bodyguard's warning glare, until she was kneeling beside the booth, eye level with the trembling woman. She let the American accent drop, let the flat vowels soften into something older, something that tasted like rosemary and summer in the hills outside Palermo. Signora, non si preoccupi, tutto andrà bene. Don't worry, everything will be okay. The diner went silent. The bodyguard froze mid-sentence. The old woman blinked, her gaze sharpening on Elena's face like fog burning off in morning sun. Recognition bloomed there, not of Elena herself, but of something deeper. A voice from the past, a memory carried on the wind. Palermo. The woman whispered, her hand reaching out to touch Elena's cheek with paper-thin fingers. Elena knotted her throat tight. Vicino. My grandmother taught me. She said it's the language for secrets and recipes. The old woman let out a long breath, her shoulders dropping as tension bled away. She picked up a biscotti, her hands steady now, and dunked it in her tea with the precision of ritual. You have kind eyes, like my Giulia. Elena smiled, sad and genuine, because she knew that name, knew it from bedtime stories and faded photographs tucked in shoeboxes. Nonna Giulia, the woman who raised her when her parents died, the woman who taught her to speak like the dead, the woman who disappeared 25 years ago without explanation, leaving behind only a locket, a cookbook, and a warning Elena never understood until now. Eat your biscotti, Bella, Elena urged gently, still in the dialect, or the coffee gets cold and God gets angry. The old woman laughed, dry and rasping, and for a moment the panic was gone. Elena stood up, her knees cracking slightly, ready to return to her corner of the universe. That was when the air changed. Heavy, charged, like the static before lightning strikes. The bell above the door hadn't rung, but every head in the diner turned toward the entrance. The man standing there looked like he'd been carved from granite and dressed by someone who understood violence as an art form. Tall, dark hair swept back, jaw shadowed by a day's growth of beard, charcoal overcoat with the collar turned up against the October rain. His eyes were dark, intelligent, and currently fixed on Elena with the intensity of a predator spotting movement in tall grass. This was Dante Valentino. Elena knew the name the way everyone in Little Italy knew it. Whispered in kitchens, printed in newspapers with words like alleged and unconfirmed. The man the police called unreachable. The man who owned half the neighborhood and all of its secrets. He walked toward booth 4 with deliberate slowness, each step a declaration. The bodyguard stepped aside immediately, head bowed. Frank looked like he was about to faint. Dante didn't look at his mother. He looked at Elena. "What did you say to her?" His voice was low, a baritone rumble that vibrated in Elena's chest. Not a threat exactly, but a demand dressed in silk. Elena swallowed hard. Her feet hurt. She was tired. She'd just calmed down an old lady while his paid muscle did nothing. "I told her to eat her biscotti before God gets angry." Dante's eyes narrowed. He looked down at his mother, who was happily dunking her cookie and tea, completely at peace. He looked back at Elena, and something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe respect, maybe calculation. "You speak the dialect, the old one, not the textbook Italian they teach at universities." Elena clutched her order pad like a shield. "My nonna was strict." Dante took a step closer, invading her personal space with the casual entitlement of a man who owned the ground beneath his feet. He smelled of rain, expensive tobacco, and sandalwood. He reached into his pocket. Elena flinched, expecting a weapon. Instead, he pulled out a money clip, peeled off $500 bills, and placed them on the table. "For the service." Elena stared at the money. More than 2 weeks' wages. Enough to fix the leak in their ceiling. Enough for Marco's inhalers. And maybe a night where she didn't lie awake doing math in her head. "I can't take that." The room gasped. Frank made a choking sound. Dante paused, his hand hovering over the cash, a flicker of genuine surprise crossing his stoic features. "Excuse me." Elena lifted her chin, fear and exhaustion mixing into something that felt dangerously close to courage. "I did my job. I helped. I didn't do it for a tip, and I certainly didn't do it for charity." Dante stared at her for a long, agonizing silence. He studied her frayed collar, the dark circles under her eyes, the defiance in her stance. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost gentle. "It's not charity. It's tribute. You did something my doctors and my men couldn't do. You brought her back." He turned to leave, sliding the money back into his clip, but before he reached the door, he stopped, glancing over his shoulder. "Keep the money, Miss Marino. Consider it a down payment." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. A down payment for what? Dante's smile was a knife wrapped in velvet. "For the conversation we're going to have, very soon." He walked out into the rain, his bodyguard trailing behind. The door swung shut, and the diner exploded into whispered speculation. But Elena didn't hear any of it. She was staring at the business card left on the table, black with raised silver lettering. Valentino Family Holdings Private, and beneath it in precise handwriting, "A mother's gratitude is worth more than you know." Elena picked up the card with trembling fingers, slid it into her apron pocket, and walked back to the kitchen on legs that felt like water. Frank was already yelling about health code violations and unauthorized customer interactions, but his voice faded into background noise. All Elena could think about was the way Dante Valentino had looked at her. Not with desire, not with menace, with recognition. Like he'd been waiting for her to appear his entire life. She clocked out at midnight her tips, plus the $500 stuffed into her jacket pocket. The subway ride to the Bronx was a blur of flickering tunnel lights and exhausted commuters. She climbed 4 flights of stairs to their walk-up, each step a negotiation with gravity. The door stuck when she pushed it open, warped wood swollen from the leak they couldn't afford to fix. Inside, Marco was asleep on the couch, his oxygen machine humming softly, the blue light from the TV casting shadows across his too pale face. He was 18. He should have been in college, chasing girls, staying up too late playing video games. Instead, he was trapped in this shoebox apartment, his lungs betraying him a little more each winter. Elena stood in the doorway, watching his chest rise and fall, and felt the weight of every decision that had led them here. NYU tuition turned into rent money. Rent money turned into medication. Medication turned into choosing which bills to pay and which to let slide into collections. She pulled the $500 from her pocket, smoothed the bills on the kitchen table, and tried to feel grateful instead of terrified. Because men like Dante Valentino didn't give away money without expecting something in return. And women like Elena Marino didn't get fairy godmothers. They got choices, bad ones. The kind that started with desperation and ended with consequences you couldn't predict. She made herself a cup of instant coffee black because they were out of milk, and sat at the table surrounded by envelopes marked Final Notice and Past Due. Her laptop was open to a spreadsheet she'd titled Financial Apocalypse, a color-coded nightmare of red numbers that never added up to survival. She pulled Nonna Giulia's locket from beneath her shirt, running her thumb over the tarnished silver. Inside was a photograph so faded it was almost abstract, a woman Giulia standing beside a man whose face was mostly shadow. But there was something on his hand, a ring, heavy, ornate. Elena squinted, bringing the photo closer to her desk lamp. The design was distinct. A crest, a lion with a crown, the same symbol she'd seen tonight engraved on Dante Valentino's pinky ring. Her coffee went cold as she stared at that photograph, her grandmother's warning echoing in her memory. Some debts can't be paid, Piccola. Some secrets are meant to stay buried. Elena closed the locket with a soft click. Outside, sirens wailed through the Bronx night. Inside, Marco's breathing rattled like dice in a cup. And somewhere in Manhattan, Dante Valentino was making plans that would change her life in ways she couldn't begin to imagine. 3 days passed. Elena picked up extra shifts, said yes to every table, smiled until her face hurt. The $500 went to Marco's specialist appointment and a week's worth of groceries that didn't come from the dollar store. She told herself the business card meant nothing, that powerful men made empty promises all the time, that she was safe in her anonymity, invisible among 8 million other New Yorkers just trying to survive. She was counting tips on Thursday night when Marco's fever spiked to 103. His skin burned under her palm, his breath coming in short, wheezing gasps that sent ice through her veins. She called the clinic. They said bring him in. She checked her bank account. $12. The copay was $50. The ambulance would be hundreds. She looked at Marco. His lips tinged blue and made the decision every poor person eventually makes. She grabbed the locket from around her neck, ready to pawn it for whatever she could get. Marco's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. No, that's all you have of her. His voice was ragged, desperate. Elena tried to pull away. It's just a necklace. It's not. You know it's not. He was right. She did know. Had always known somewhere deep in her gut that the locket meant more than sentiment, that Nonna Giulia had left it to her for a reason that went beyond memory. But reasons didn't matter when your brother couldn't breathe. The knock on the door made them both freeze. Not the landlord's aggressive pounding, not the neighbor's courtesy tap. This was a single authoritative thud that demanded acknowledgement. Elena moved to the peephole, saw a distorted fisheye view of an expensive suit, and felt her stomach drop. She opened the door with the chain still latched. The bodyguard from the diner stood in the hallway, massive and expressionless. But he wasn't alone. Behind him, leaning casually against the graffiti-stained wall, was Dante Valentino. Miss Marino. His voice was calm, like this was a scheduled appointment and not a midnight intrusion. We need to talk. Elena's fingers tightened on the doorframe. About what? About the fact that your brother needs a hospital and you're considering selling the one thing your grandmother told you never to lose. Her blood turned to ice. How do you? I know a great many things, Elena. May I come in? She should have said no. Should have slammed the door, called the police, done anything except what she did. But Marco was wheezing behind her, and Dante Valentino was looking at her with something that almost resembled concern, and she was so tired of fighting alone. She undid the chain, opened the door. Dante walked in like he owned the place, which, given the neighborhood's ownership structure, he probably did. He took in the poverty with a single sweep of his eyes, the mismatched furniture, the stack of medical bills on the counter, the damp stains spreading across the ceiling. But there was no disgust in his expression, just validation. like he'd expected exactly this. The bodyguard stayed in the hallway. Dante approached the couch where Marco lay, his movements careful, unthreatening. He crouched down, bringing himself to eye level with the 18-year-old struggling to breathe. Marco Marino, 18. Chronic asthma complicated by pneumonia last winter. No insurance. $3,000 in outstanding medical debt, not including tonight's emergency. Dante's voice was factual, not cruel. You should be in a hospital right now, not rationing albuterol and hoping the fever breaks. Marco's eyes were defiant despite the oxygen deprivation. Who the hell are you? Someone who understands what it's like to watch the people you love suffer because the system doesn't care if they live or die. Dante stood, turning to Elena. I'm offering you a job. Live-in companion for my mother, someone who speaks her language, someone she trusts. Elena crossed her arms, trying to look stronger than she felt. I'm a waitress, not a nurse. I don't need a nurse. I can buy 100 nurses. I need someone who understands the culture, someone who can reach her when she's lost. He paused, his dark eyes holding hers. Someone who reminds her of Julia. The name landed like a bomb. Elena took a step back. You knew my grandmother? No, but my mother did. Very well. Dante pulled a photograph from his coat pocket, placed it on the cluttered table. This was taken in 1998, 6 months before Julia disappeared. Elena picked up the photo with shaking hands. It showed a younger Carmela Valentino standing in what looked like a restaurant kitchen. Beside her, wearing an apron and laughing at something off camera, was Nonna Julia. But what made Elena's breath catch was the third person in the frame, a man in his 50s distinguished with the same dark eyes as Dante. And on his hand, unmistakable even in the faded photograph, was the lion crest ring. Your father, Elena whispered. Don Giuseppe Valentino, yes. Dante's voice was carefully neutral. Your grandmother worked for him. Not as a cook, though she was talented in the kitchen. She was a trusted advisor, someone who helped him navigate the complexities of our world. Elena's mind raced, connecting dots she'd spent years trying to ignore. The way Nonna never talked about her past. The sudden move to a different state when Elena was 7. The nightmares her grandmother used to have, waking up screaming names Elena didn't recognize. The cookbook filled with recipes that used measurements that never quite made sense. What happened to her? Elena heard herself ask. Dante's jaw tightened. She disappeared. 1999. Took something with her. Something my father spent the rest of his life trying to find. What did she take? That's what I need you to help me discover. Dante gestured to Marco, still struggling for breath on the couch. But first we get your brother to a hospital. Then we talk terms. Elena looked at Marco, whose lips were now definitely blue. Looked at the locket in her hand. Looked at Dante Valentino, the devil, in a bespoke suit, offering salvation with one hand and damnation with the other. If I say yes, Marco comes with me. He gets full medical care. Real doctors. Not clinic nurses who see 100 patients a day. Dante nodded once. Done. The estate has a guest cottage, private, secure. He'll have his own space. And if I want to leave, you can walk away any time, but the medical debt gets paid regardless. I don't punish people for honesty. Marco tried to sit up, his voice a rasp. Elena, don't. You don't know what you're getting into. But she did know. Had known since the moment Dante walked into Angelo's corner and looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his entire life. This wasn't about a job. This was about Nonna Julia's secrets, about the things she'd taken when she disappeared, about the reason a dying old woman called Elena by her grandmother's name. Elena met Dante's gaze. I need to pack. Relief flickered across his features, there and gone. I have people who can help. No. She moved to the bedroom, started throwing clothes into a garbage bag because she didn't own a suitcase. I pack my own things. 20 minutes later, Elena and Marco were in the back of a black town car, their entire lives reduced to 2 garbage bags and a backpack. The Bronx faded behind them, replaced by the glittering skyline of Manhattan, then the manicured suburbs of Long Island. Elena watched the streetlights blur past her grandmother's locket heavy against her chest and wondered what price she'd just agreed to pay. Dante sat in the front passenger seat, occasionally glancing back at Marco, who'd already fallen asleep thanks to the emergency inhaler the bodyguard had produced. "There's a medical team waiting at the estate. They'll stabilize him tonight. Full workup tomorrow." Elena's throat was tight. "Why are you doing this?" "Because my mother asks for you. Every day since we met at the diner. She calls you the girl with Julia's voice." Dante turned to look at her fully. "And because I believe your grandmother left you something. A message. A map. I don't know what, but I know it's important. Important enough that people are still looking for it 25 years later." "What people?" "The kind who don't take no for an answer." His expression darkened. "The kind who would use your brother to get to you if they knew what I suspect." Fear coiled in Elena's stomach. "And you're different. I'm offering you protection. They would offer you a grave." He faced forward again. "There's a difference between monsters, Miss Marino. I'm the kind that keeps other monsters away." The car pulled up to iron gates that swung open with electronic precision. The estate sprawled before them, all Georgian columns and manicured lawns, cameras sweeping like mechanical owls. It was beautiful. It was a fortress. It was everything Elena's life wasn't. A woman in medical scrubs was waiting at the guest cottage along with two men carrying emergency equipment. They descended on Marco with professional efficiency, checking vitals, administering medication, speaking in low, urgent tones. Elena stood frozen in the doorway until Dante's hand touched her shoulder, gentle despite the calluses. "He's safe now. I promise." Elena watched the medics work, her vision blurring with tears she'd been holding back for 3 days. 3 years. Her entire adult life. "I don't trust you." "Good." Dante removed his hand, stepped back. "Trust would be naive. But you can trust that my word means something. When I say he's safe, he's safe. When I say you can leave, you can leave. I don't lie to the people in my care." The head medic approached, nodding to Dante. "Pneumonia early stage. We're starting IV antibiotics. He'll need to stay on oxygen tonight, but he'll be fine." Elena felt her knees weaken with relief. Dante caught her elbow, steadying her. "When's the last time you slept?" "I don't remember. There's a bedroom upstairs. Clean sheets. Lock on the door." His voice dropped lower. "You're not a prisoner, Elena. You're a guest, an employee, maybe eventually an ally, but never a prisoner." She pulled away from his touch, needing the distance. "I want to see my brother settled first." "Of course." They stayed in the cottage until Marco was tucked into a bed that probably cost more than Elena's yearly rent, an oxygen mask over his face, his breathing finally even and deep. The medics promised to check on him every 2 hours, left a buzzer Elena could press if anything changed. She sat beside him, holding his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin and the steady pulse that meant alive, alive, alive. Dante waited by the door, patient as a statue. When Elena finally stood, her body screaming with exhaustion, he led her to the main house without a word. The interior was exactly what she expected: marble floors, oil paintings, furniture that looked like it belonged in museums. But there was something else. Books. Everywhere. Not just decorative leather-bound sets, but real books. Worn spines, dog-eared pages, philosophy, poetry, history. Dante caught her looking. "My father believed knowledge was the only real power. Everything else can be taken. What you know stays with you until you die." He showed her to a guest room on the 2nd floor. Simple. Elegant. A 4-poster bed with Egyptian cotton sheets. An ensuite bathroom with heated floors. A window overlooking gardens that probably employed a dozen groundskeepers. It was more luxury than Elena had experienced in her entire life. "Get some sleep. We'll talk in the morning." Dante moved toward the door, then paused. "Elena, the locket you're wearing. May I see it?" Every instinct screamed to refuse, but she'd already made the deal, already sold her soul, or at least rented it. She unclasped the chain, placed the locket in his outstretched palm. Dante opened it with careful fingers, studying the faded photograph inside. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. Grief. Rage. All of it controlled, compressed into a single sharp breath. "This man, the one standing beside your grandmother. Do you know who he is?" Elena shook her head. Dante's thumb traced the edge of the photograph. "This is FBI Deputy Director James Monroe, 1998. He was investigating my father for racketeering. He disappeared 3 months after this photo was taken. Officially, he retired. Unofficially." He closed the locket, handed it back to her. "Your grandmother didn't just work for my father, Elena. She worked against him. She was FBI, deep cover. And when she left, she took evidence that could have destroyed 5 crime families and half the police department." The room tilted. Elena gripped the bedpost to stay upright. "That's impossible. Nonna was a seamstress. She made communion dresses, and she was many things: a seamstress, a cook, a confidant, and yes, a federal agent who spent 15 years building a case." Dante's voice was soft, almost gentle. "Which means the thing she left you isn't just sentimental. It's evidence. It's leverage. It's the most dangerous inheritance anyone could carry." Elena sank onto the bed, her legs giving out. "I don't have anything. She died 2 years ago. All she left me was the locket and her cookbook and—" She stopped. The cookbook. The one with recipes that used measurements like 2 cups of tears and a tablespoon of blood money. The one Nonna made her promise never to throw away. "Some recipes are worth more than food, Piccola. Remember that." Dante saw the realization cross her face. "What is it?" Elena's hands were shaking. "She left me her cookbook. I thought it was just sentimental. But the recipes, they never made sense. The measurements were wrong. The ingredients were strange." "Where is it?" "My apartment, kitchen shelf." Dante pulled out his phone, spoke briefly in Italian, then pocketed it. "I'll have someone retrieve it tonight, discreetly." He moved toward the door again, then stopped one more time. "Elena, there are people who've been looking for that book for 25 years. People who killed to find it. People who would kill again." His dark eyes held hers. "You walked into Angelo's corner 3 days ago and spoke a dialect that only 3 people in New York still remember. One of them is my mother. One of them was your grandmother. And the third—" He let the sentence hang. "Who's the third?" "The man who drowned Julia in the East River when she wouldn't tell him where she hid the evidence." The words hit like a physical blow. Elena's grandmother hadn't disappeared. She'd been murdered. And the secret she died protecting was now sitting on a shelf in a Bronx apartment disguised as family recipes. Dante's voice gentled. "Get some sleep. Lock the door. Tomorrow we figure out what she left you. Together." He closed the door softly behind him. Elena sat on the bed, clutching the locket so hard the metal bit into her palm. Outside, the October wind rattled the windows. Inside, her heart hammered a rhythm that sounded like danger, danger, danger. But beneath the fear was something else. Something that felt dangerously like purpose. For the first time in years, Elena Marino wasn't just surviving. She was standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying and utterly beyond her control. And instead of running, she was walking toward it with her eyes wide open. Because her grandmother hadn't been just a seamstress. She'd been a warrior, a woman who stood against monsters and paid with her life. And if Nonna Julia had left Elena a weapon disguised as recipes, then maybe it was time to stop being the girl who counted tips and started being the woman who settled debts. Elena locked the door, turned off the lights, and lay down in Egyptian cotton sheets that felt like clouds. Through the window she could see the estate's floodlights creating halos in the autumn fog. Somewhere in the main house, Dante Valentino was making phone calls, moving pieces on a board she couldn't yet see. And somewhere in the Bronx, a cookbook was being retrieved from a kitchen that smelled of poverty and desperation. The last thing Elena thought before sleep took her was a memory. Nonna Julia in the kitchen kneading dough, her voice low and melodic as she sang in the old dialect. And when young Elena asked what the song meant, her grandmother smiled and said, "It means some debts take a lifetime to repay. Start with trust. End with forever. Elena's eyes snapped open in the darkness. Those exact words. She'd heard them before, not in a song, in a recipe. The last page of the cookbook. Amore paziente, patient love. She'd thought it was about braising meat, about low heat and long hours. But it wasn't about food at all. It was a message, a warning, a promise. And tomorrow, when that cookbook arrived, Elena Marino was going to decode every single secret her grandmother had died to protect. The cookbook arrived at dawn, delivered by a man Elena didn't recognize, wrapped in plastic like evidence. She met him at the cottage door, Marco still sleeping behind her, his breathing steady for the first time in weeks. The man didn't speak, just handed her the package and disappeared into the morning fog that clung to the estate grounds like a shroud. Elena carried it inside her hands, trembling as she peeled away the layers of protection. The cover was stained and worn, the binding cracked from years of use. La Recette di Giulia, embossed in faded gold lettering. Elena had looked at this book 1,000 times, flipped through its pages while searching for something quick to make with pantry staples. She'd never really read it, never questioned why a recipe for risotto required 2 cups rice, 4 cups tears, 1 tablespoon blood money. She'd assumed it was Nona's dark humor. Her way of saying cooking required sacrifice. She opened to the first page, Risotto alla Milanese 1995. Below the title, in her grandmother's precise cursive measurements that made no sense, saffron threads 15,000, Parmesan Anderson, white wine Municipal Court Northern District. Elena's breath caught. 15,000, not threads of saffron, dollars. Judge Anderson. She'd seen that name in the news 2 months ago, confirmed to the appellate court despite ethics violations that somehow disappeared from his record. Northern District. That was Manhattan. Her pulse hammered as she flipped to the next recipe. Osso buco, 1996. Veal shanks, 3 precinct captains. Gremolata, Brooklyn Heights penthouse. Braising liquid evidence locker case number 4478. This wasn't a cookbook. It was a ledger. Every recipe was a transaction. Every ingredient was a bribe, a payoff, a piece of corruption carefully documented in a language only someone who knew the dialect would understand. Someone like Nonna Giulia, someone like Elena. She spent the next hour cross-referencing dates, locations, amounts, built a mental map of 25 years of organized crime woven through New York's legal system like cancer through bone. Judges, prosecutors, police captains, union bosses, city councilmen, all of them bought and paid for their prices listed in cups and tablespoons and cooking temperatures that translated to account numbers and wire transfers. A knock on the cottage door made her jump. She shoved the cookbook under a couch cushion as Dante entered carrying 2 cups of espresso. He looked like he hadn't slept, his shirt wrinkled, his jaw shadowed with stubble that made him look more human and somehow more dangerous. Marco's vitals are good. The night nurse said he slept through without needing extra oxygen. He handed her one of the cups, his fingers brushing hers. Did it arrive? Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. And she pulled the cookbook from its hiding place, open to a random page. Pasta alla Norma, 1998. Eggplant 2 kilos, Union Local, 247. Ricotta Salata, offshore account, Cayman Islands. Basil fresh from the Garden of Silence. Dante's expression didn't change, but his knuckles whitened around his espresso cup. The Garden of Silence. That's what my father called the cemetery where he buried people who talked too much. Elena's stomach turned. How many recipes are there? Count them. She flipped through the book. 87 recipes, 87 documented crimes spanning from 1985 to 1999. Enough to dismantle 5 crime families and bring down half of New York's political establishment. Enough to get Nonna Giulia killed. The last page. Dante's voice was tight. What does it say? Elena turned to the final entry. Amore paziente, patient love, 2024. Her breath caught. This was written 3 months ago, after Nonna died. Dante moved closer, reading over her shoulder. The recipe was different from the others. No measurements, No coded transactions, just a message written in the same precise cursive. To Elena, my brave girl, if you're reading this, you've found him. The boy I saved when he was 6 years old. The man who carries his father's sins but not his father's soul. Trust the lion with the broken crown. He will protect you when I cannot. The truth is buried where the roses bloom. Forgive me for the weight I've placed on your shoulders. Some debts take a lifetime to repay. Start with trust. End with forever. G. Silence filled the cottage, heavy as stone. Elena's hands shook so badly the book nearly slipped from her grasp. She knew. Somehow she knew I'd meet you. That I'd end up here. Dante's jaw worked. The boy she saved. That was me. 1993. I was kidnapped by a rival family. Held for ransom. My father paid, but they were going to kill me anyway. Your grandmother was there, working undercover in their kitchen. She smuggled me out in a laundry cart, drove me to a safe house, called my father from a payphone. His voice cracked just slightly. I never knew her name. My father wouldn't tell me. Said it was safer if I didn't know who saved my life. Elena's mind raced, connecting pieces she'd spent years keeping separate. The lion with the broken crown, your family crest. But why broken? Dante pulled a ring from his pocket. The same lion crest from the photograph, but closer inspection revealed a crack through the crown. My father had this made after the kidnapping, said it was a reminder that even kings bleed, that power is fragile, that the people who save you matter more than the people who fear you. He placed the ring on the table between them. He gave this to Julia before she disappeared. Told her if she ever needed anything, bring this ring and he'd grant any request. No questions asked. But she never came back. No, she died before she could. Dante's eyes were dark with something Elena couldn't name. Grief, rage, regret. The truth is buried where the roses bloom. Do you know what that means? Elena thought of Nona's apartment, the tiny fire escape where she grew herbs in coffee cans and tomatoes in plastic buckets. No roses, just basil and oregano and the occasional stubborn marigold. She didn't have roses. She said they were too much trouble, too fragile for city air. Then it's not literal. Dante picked up the cookbook, flipped through pages with practiced speed. Roses appear in 3 recipes. Here. Rosewater panna cotta, 1997, sweetened with the tears of thorns. And here. Rose hip jam, 1998, preserved in the garden of the Castellano estate. And this one. Rose petal gelato, 1999, frozen in time like memory itself. Elena leaned closer. Castellano. That name keeps appearing. Who is he? Vincent Castellano. Head of the Castellano family. My father's biggest rival until Giuseppe died in 1999. Dante's voice went cold. The autopsy said suicide, gunshot to the temple in his study. But my father would never kill himself. He was too proud, too angry at the world. You think Castellano killed him? I know he did. I was 12 years old. I heard the argument through the door, my father screaming about a ledger, about proof that would bury them all, about a woman who promised to keep it safe. Dante closed the cookbook with deliberate care. 3 days later, my father was dead. A week after that, your grandmother disappeared. I've spent 25 years trying to prove what I already know, that Castellano murdered my father for this book. And when Julia wouldn't tell him where she hid it, he killed her too. The morning light shifted, turning the cottage golden and surreal. Elena felt like she was watching her life from outside her body. A week ago, she was counting tips at a diner. Now she was sitting in a mob boss's guest house decoding her dead grandmother's evidence ledger, learning that the woman who raised her was an FBI agent who saved Dante Valentino's life and died protecting secrets that could reshape New York's power structure. The roses. Elena's voice sounded distant to her own ears. If it's not literal, it's a place. Somewhere significant to Nonna. Somewhere she'd hide something important. Dante pulled out his phone, started typing. I'll have my people search property records. See if Julia owned anything under her name or an alias. Wait. Elena grabbed his wrist, stopping him. Your people. How many of them can you actually trust? He went very still. Why? Because someone updated this cookbook after Nonna died. Someone had access to her apartment. Someone knew where she kept it. Elena pulled the book back, pointed to the final recipe's date. March 2024. 3 months ago. Nonna died in December 2023. So either she came back from the dead to write this, or someone else knows about the code, someone who wanted me to find this book, to bring it to you. Dante's expression shifted from surprise to calculation to something darker. Frank Russo, my consigliere. He was with my father the night he died. He's the one who found the body, the one who called me home from school, the one who's been by my side for 25 years. His hands clenched into fists. If he's the mole, if he's been feeding information to Castellano this entire time, then everyone in this house is compromised. Elena stood up, her survival instincts finally overriding her shock. Marco, we need to get Marco out of here. He's safer here than anywhere else. If Castellano knows you have the book, he'll use your brother as leverage. At least here we have walls, guards, cameras. Cameras that Frank controls, guards that Frank hired, walls that Frank knows every inch of. Elena moved toward the bedroom where Marco slept, her mind racing through possibilities. You said I could leave any time. Does that apply now? Dante blocked her path, his body a wall she couldn't move around. If you run, they'll find you within 24 hours. If you stay, I can protect you, but only if you trust me. Trust? Elena laughed, brittle and sharp. You just told me your second-in-command might be a traitor, that my grandmother was murdered for this book, that people have been hunting it for 25 years, and you want me to trust you? Yes. His voice was soft, almost gentle. Because I'm the only person in this city who wants you alive more than I want that book. Your grandmother saved my life when I was 6 years old. She saw something in me worth saving when everyone else saw a mob prince destined for darkness. I owe her a debt I can never repay, but I can protect her granddaughter. I can make sure her sacrifice meant something. Elena searched his face for deception and found only exhaustion. Only the weight of a man who'd spent 25 years carrying his father's sins and his mother's grief. How do I know you're not using me the same way Castellano would? How do I know this isn't just another transaction in a cookbook full of corruption? You don't. Dante stepped back, giving her space. But here's what I can offer. I'll send Marco to a private facility upstate. Top-tier medical care. Round-the-clock security that answers only to me, not Frank. You stay here, help me decode the rest of the book, and we find whatever Julia buried before Castellano does. When it's over, you get a choice. Walk away with enough money to never work another double shift, or stay and help me burn the whole system down. And if I choose to burn it down, then we become the most dangerous partnership in New York, the granddaughter of an FBI agent and the son of a Don, the woman who speaks the language of secrets, and the man who knows where all the bodies are buried. His dark eyes held hers. Together we could do what neither Julia nor my father could do alone. We could end this. All of it. Marco appeared in the bedroom doorway, leaning against the frame, his face pale but alert. Elena, don't trust him. Men like this, they don't change. They don't save people. They use them up and throw them away. Dante didn't look offended, didn't argue. Just waited, letting Elena make the choice that would determine whether she lived as a victim or died as a warrior. Elena thought about Nonna Julia, about a woman who spent 15 years undercover earning the trust of monsters so she could document their crimes, about a woman who saved a 6-year-old boy from a laundry cart and refused to give up her secrets even when they drowned her in the East River, about a woman who left her granddaughter a cookbook and a locket and a message that said, "Trust the lion with the broken crown." "Send Marco upstate. I'll stay." The words came out steady, certain. "But if anything happens to him, if one hair on his head is harmed, I'll take this book to every newspaper in New York and burn your family to ash. Do we understand each other?" Dante's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Perfectly. The next 3 days blurred into a surreal routine. Marco left in an armored SUV guarded by men Dante swore answered only to him, bound for a facility in the Adirondacks where the air was clean and the doctors were discreet. Elena moved into the main house, a guest room down the hall from Carmela's suite, and spent her mornings learning to care for a woman who sometimes recognized her and sometimes called her Julia and sometimes screamed at ghosts only she could see. The work was harder than waitressing, required more patience, more compassion, more willingness to be screamed at without taking it personally. But there was something sacred about it too, something that felt like penance, like Elena was repaying a debt she didn't know she owed. Carmela had good days and bad days. On good days, she told stories about growing up in Sicily, about immigrating to New York with nothing but a suitcase and a cousin's address, about meeting Don Giuseppe at a church social and falling in love with a man who promised to build her a castle. On bad days, she threw breakfast trays and accused Elena of poisoning her food and demanded to see her son Antonio, who didn't exist and never had. It was on one of the good days that Carmela mentioned the roses. They were in the sunroom, afternoon light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, Carmela's hands working on embroidery that would never be finished. Elena was reading aloud from a book of Italian poetry when the old woman suddenly looked up, her eyes clear and focused. "Julia's roses. Do you remember them, child?" Elena's heart stuttered. "I remember Nonna talked about roses sometimes, said they were too delicate for city life." "Not too delicate, too dangerous." Carmela's needle paused mid-stitch. "She planted them at the safe house, the place Giuseppe bought for her in case she ever needed to disappear. He gave her a house in Brooklyn Heights overlooking the river, beautiful brownstone with a garden in back. She filled it with roses, every color, every variety. Said if anything happened to her, the truth would bloom where the flowers died." Elena's pulse hammered. "Do you know the address?" But Carmela's eyes had already gone distant again, sliding back into the fog. "Antonio should be home soon. I need to start dinner. He likes his pasta al dente, not too soft. Never too soft." Elena stood up slowly, her mind racing. A brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, a garden of roses, the truth buried where the flowers bloom. She needed to tell Dante, needed to search property records, needed to— The door to the sunroom opened. Frank Russo stood there, his expression neutral, his body language casual. But Elena had learned to read danger in the tilt of a shoulder, the placement of hands. Frank's right hand was in his jacket pocket. His left was holding a phone. "Miss Marino, Mr. Valentino would like to see you in his study." Elena's mouth went dry. "Now, if it's convenient." Frank's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Though I suspect it's important." She followed him through the mansion's corridors, every instinct screaming to run. But running would confirm suspicion. Running would put Marco at risk. So she walked calmly, her hands steady at her sides, her breathing controlled while her mind catalogued every exit, every potential weapon, every person they passed who might help or hinder. Dante's study was exactly what she expected. Dark wood paneling, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk that looked like it had witnessed 50 years of terrible decisions. Dante stood by the window, his back to the door, his posture rigid. "Close the door, Frank." Frank did, positioning himself in front of it, blocking the exit. Elena's survival instincts went into overdrive, her vision sharpening her muscles, preparing for violence she'd never trained for. Dante turned around. His face was carefully blank. "Tell me about the cookbook, Elena." She kept her voice steady. "What do you want to know?" "Everything you've learned. Every transaction. Every name. Every detail." He moved closer, his dark eyes searching hers for something she couldn't identify. "And don't lie to me. I'll know." Elena made a choice. The same choice Nonna Giulia made when she decided to document evil instead of ignoring it. She pulled the folded papers from her pocket, the notes she'd made over 3 sleepless nights translating recipes into evidence. 87 transactions, spanning 1985 to 1999. Judges, prosecutors, union bosses, city officials. Total estimated value of bribes and payoffs $237 million. All of it documented. All of it traceable if you know how to read the code. Dante took the papers, scanned them with practiced speed. His jaw tightened with each page. When he reached the end, he looked up at Frank. "Well," Frank's hand came out of his pocket, not holding a gun, holding a flash drive. "I've been updating the ledger for 25 years. Every transaction that came after Giuseppe's death, every bribe Castellano paid, every corrupt official he bought." He placed the flash drive on Dante's desk. "Julia gave me instructions before she died. Said if anything happened to her, I was to keep the record. Make sure her work continued. Make sure when the time came we'd have enough evidence to bury them all." Elena's knees nearly gave out. "You knew. All this time you knew what Nonna was doing." Frank's expression softened just slightly. "I was FBI too, Julia's partner. We worked the Valentino case together for 12 years. When the mole in the bureau compromised our investigation, we went dark, stayed undercover even after the official operation ended, because the corruption went deeper than anyone imagined. Deeper than the mob. Into City Hall, the courts, the police department itself." Dante's voice was dangerously quiet. "My father. Did you kill him?" "No." Frank met his gaze without flinching. "But I was there when he died. Giuseppe discovered what Julia really was 3 days before his death. Found documents she'd been careless with. Confronted her in his study. She told him everything. Offered him a deal. Help her take down Castellano and the others, and she'd make sure he got immunity, a chance to start over. And he agreed, started gathering additional evidence. Financial records Julia couldn't access, names of offshore accounts, proof of murders the Bureau could never connect." Frank's voice roughened. "But Castellano found out. Sent men to the estate. They made it look like suicide, but Giuseppe fought. Fought hard enough to leave evidence. Blood under his fingernails. Defensive wounds on his hands. The coroner covered it up. But I kept the real autopsy report. Kept it all these years, waiting for the day when you'd be ready to hear the truth." Dante sank into his desk chair, his face a mask of controlled devastation. "Why didn't you tell me? Why let me spend 25 years thinking my father was weak enough to take his own life?" "Because you were 12 years old. Because Castellano was watching. Because if you'd known the truth, you would have gone after him with everything you had, and he would have killed you." Frank's voice cracked. "Your father's last words were protect my son, not avenge me, not destroy Castellano, protect Dante. So that's what I did. Stayed close, kept the evidence safe, waited for the day when you'd be strong enough, smart enough, careful enough to finish what Giuseppe and Julia started." Silence filled the study, heavy and absolute. Elena watched Dante process 25 years of lies and truth and grief all at once. Watched his hands shake before he clenched them into fists. Watched his breathing slow as he forced control over emotions that could have drowned him. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady. "Where's Castellano now?" "The Fulton Fish Market, Pier 17. He runs his operation from a warehouse there. Has for 30 years. Frank pulled out his phone, showed them a surveillance photo. Vincent Castellano was 65, silver-haired, distinguished-looking. He could have been a banker or a lawyer or a college professor. But his eyes were the eyes of a man who'd ordered drownings and cover-ups and murders that never made the news. Dante stood up, his decision made. "We go tonight. End this." "With what?" Elena heard herself ask. "We have a cookbook and a flash drive. We need the actual evidence. The documents Giuseppe was gathering. The proof that connects everything." "The roses." Dante turned to her. "Your grandmother said the truth is buried where the roses bloom. Frank, did Julia have a safe house? A place Giuseppe set up for her?" Frank nodded slowly. "Brooklyn Heights. Brownstone on Cranberry Street. Giuseppe bought it under a shell corporation in 1996. Julia lived there on and off when it wasn't safe to stay at the estate. She kept files there. Evidence she couldn't risk storing anywhere official. Is it still standing?" "Last I checked, yes. But it's been abandoned for 25 years. The garden's overgrown. The house is condemned. City's been trying to seize it for back taxes, but the ownership's so buried in shell corporations they can't untangle it." Dante's eyes met Elena's. "We need to go there, tonight, before Castellano realizes you've decoded the book." "He already knows." Frank's voice was grim. I got word this morning. Castellano's men have been asking questions in Little Italy, showing your photo, Elena, asking who you are, where you work, who you're connected to. They know you spoke to Carmela. They know Dante brought you here. They're putting pieces together. Elena's blood ran cold. Marco, if they connect me to him... Marco's safe. The facility I sent him to is off-grid. No patient records, no paper trail. Even if they find out he exists, they won't find him. Dante's voice was certain. But you're exposed, which means we move now. Get the evidence tonight. Take it to the FBI tomorrow. End this before Castellano can retaliate. The FBI? Elena's laugh was bitter. Frank just said there's a mole. How do we know who to trust? Deputy Director James Monroe. Frank pulled up a photo on his phone. The same man from Elena's locket. Older now, grayer but unmistakable. He's still there, still fighting. Julia trusted him with her life. I trust him with yours. Dante grabbed his coat from the back of his chair. Frank, get the car. Elena, you're with me. We go to Brooklyn Heights, find whatever Julia buried and bring it back before sunrise. Castellano's people watch the estate, but they're not expecting us to leave. We have a 6-hour window before they realize we're gone. Elena should have been terrified, should have demanded to be taken back to her apartment, to her old life, to the safety of anonymity. But Nonna Julia's voice was in her head clear as bells. Some debts take a lifetime to repay. Start with trust. End with forever. She stood up, met Dante's gaze with steel in her own. Let's go dig up the truth. They left through the service entrance, a route that avoided the main security cameras. Frank drove a nondescript sedan that blended into Brooklyn traffic like water into rain. Elena sat in the back with Dante, the cookbook in her lap, her grandmother's locket cold against her skin. The brownstone on Cranberry Street was a ghost. Windows boarded up, front steps crumbling. Yellow condemned notices plastered across the door. But the bones were beautiful. Elena could see what it had been once. A home, a sanctuary, a place where a woman could breathe between missions and pretend she was normal. Frank picked the lock with practiced ease. The door swung open on rusted hinges, revealing darkness that smelled of mold and decay and time. Dante pulled out a flashlight, swept the beam across what had once been a living room. Furniture covered in sheets, walls water-stained and peeling, a staircase that looked ready to collapse. The gardens in back. Frank led the way through the house, his footsteps careful on floorboards that groaned protest. Giuseppe had a shed built, said it was for tools, but Julia used it for files, documents she couldn't risk storing anywhere else. The back door opened onto what must have been beautiful once, a garden with raised beds and stone pathways and an arbor that probably held climbing roses in summer. Now it was a jungle, weeds chest-high, trees encroaching from neighboring yards, and in the center, half hidden by undergrowth, a small wooden shed with a padlock that looked newer than it should. Dante approached slowly, his flashlight revealing fresh scratches on the lock. Someone's been here. Recently. Frank pulled a bolt cutter from his coat. Stand back. The lock snapped. The door swung open, and inside, illuminated by 3 flashlight beams, was a filing cabinet, clean, organized, completely out of place in the decay surrounding it. Elena's hands shook as she pulled open the top drawer. Manila folders, dozens of them, each labeled with a name, a date, a case number. She pulled one at random. Judge Anderson, 1995. Inside, copies of bank statements, wire transfers, photos of the judge accepting an envelope in a parking garage. Everything needed to prove corruption beyond reasonable doubt. This is it. Her voice was barely a whisper. This is what Nonna died protecting. Dante pulled out his phone, started photographing everything. We document it all, every page, every photo, upload it to a secure server before we leave this garden. Frank was already pulling files, spreading them across the shed floor, systematic and efficient. Elena joined them, her hands moving on autopilot while her mind reeled. This was her grandmother's legacy. Not recipes or lockets or sentimental keepsakes. Evidence. Proof. The power to destroy an empire built on blood and bribes. They worked in silence for an hour, photographing faster than seemed possible. the flash from Dante's phone creating a strobe effect that made the whole scene feel unreal. Elena was reaching for the last folder in the bottom drawer when Frank's phone buzzed. He checked it. His face went white. "We have to go. Now." "What happened?" "Castellano's men just hit the estate. They took Carmela." The drive back to Sands Point felt like falling into hell with the windows down. Frank pushed the sedan to 90 on the expressway, weaving through traffic with the precision of a man who'd done 1,000 high-speed pursuits. Elena gripped the door handle, the filing cabinet secured in the trunk, the cookbook pressed against her chest like a talisman that had already failed to protect the people she cared about. Dante was on the phone, his voice clipped and controlled despite the fury radiating from every muscle. "How many men? When who was on duty?" A pause. "I don't care what the cameras show. Get me eyes on every exit. Lock down the perimeter. Nobody leaves until I get there." He hung up his knuckles white against the phone's edge. "They came in through the service entrance. Same route we used to leave. 4 men, professional. Knew exactly where to go. Disabled the panic room before Carmela could reach it. Had her in a van and gone within 6 minutes. Frank's jaw tightened. "Inside job. Had to be." "I know." Dante's voice was ice over fire. "Which means we have maybe 2 hours before Castellano realizes we're not at the estate, before he figures out we found the files, before he decides Carmela's more valuable dead than alive." Elena forced words through the terror constricting her throat. "He'll want a trade, the evidence for your mother. He'll want more than that. He'll want me to watch her die the way my father watched Julia drown. He'll want to break me before he kills us both." Dante turned to look at her, his dark eyes burning with something beyond rage. "Elena, when we get there you stay in the car. Frank takes you straight to Deputy Director Monroe. You give him everything, every file, every photograph, every name in that cookbook. You make sure Julia's sacrifice means something. And I get my mother back, or I die trying." "That's not a plan, that's suicide." Elena leaned forward, gripping the back of his seat. "We have leverage now. We have proof. We use it to negotiate, not to... Negotiation requires trust. Castellano doesn't negotiate. He eliminates threats." Dante's voice softened just barely. "Your grandmother spent 15 years gathering evidence because she understood something fundamental about evil. You can't reason with it. You can't reform it. You can only expose it and let the consequences fall where they may. That's what we're going to do." Frank's phone buzzed again. He checked it one-handed, cursed under his breath. "They left a message. Fulton Fish Market, Pier 17, midnight. You come alone or she drowns like Julia." Elena's stomach lurched. "It's a trap." "Of course it's a trap." Dante checked his watch. "Which is why we're not playing by their rules." The estate came into view, floodlights blazing against the night sky, police cars clustered around the entrance. Not just any police. Detectives Elena recognized from the news, the kind who investigated murders too high profile to sweep under rugs. Frank slowed as they approached, showing credentials to the officer managing the perimeter. The cop waved them through his face, professionally neutral. But Elena saw the flicker in his eyes when he looked at Dante. Recognition, maybe fear. Definitely calculation, the kind that said this cop was trying to decide which side of the coming war would keep him alive. Inside the mansion, chaos reigned, forensic techs dusting for prints, detectives interviewing terrified staff, and in the center of it all, a woman in her 50s wearing an FBI windbreaker, her iron-gray hair pulled back, her expression carved from granite. She locked eyes with Frank the moment they entered. "Agent Russo, it's been a long time." Frank's shoulders straightened. "Deputy Director Monroe." Elena's breath caught. Not Deputy Director James Monroe from the Lockett photograph. This was someone else, someone whose nameplate read A. Monroe, and whose presence commanded the room like a general surveying a battlefield. The woman's gaze shifted to Dante. "Mr. Valentino, I'm told your mother was abducted approximately 90 minutes ago. I'm also told you've been difficult to locate during that time." "I was retrieving evidence." Dante's voice was steady. Evidence that proves Vincent Castellano has been running a criminal enterprise for 30 years with the cooperation of corrupt officials at every level of city government. Deputy Director Monroe's expression didn't change. That's a serious allegation. It's a documented fact. Dante nodded to Frank, who pulled out his phone, started airdropping files. 25 years of transaction records, photographs, bank statements, audio recordings, everything needed to bring RICO charges against Castellano and 47 co-conspirators, including 3 sitting judges, 2 precinct captains, and 1 of your own deputy directors. The room went silent. Every detective, every tech, every officer frozen mid-motion. Deputy Director Monroe's phone buzzed repeatedly as files flooded in. She opened one, then another. Her face remained impassive, but her fingers tightened on the phone. "Where did you get this?" "From the woman who spent 15 years compiling it. FBI agent Julia Marino, who worked undercover in my father's organization from 1984 to 1999, who was murdered by Vincent Castellano when she refused to reveal the location of her evidence." Dante's voice carried through the mansion like a eulogy. "She hid it in a safe house in Brooklyn Heights. We retrieved it 2 hours ago, and now we're giving it to you along with additional documentation Agent Russo has maintained since her death." Monroe's eyes cut to Frank. "You've been active this entire time, 25 years, without reporting to the Bureau." "I've been reporting to Deputy Director James Monroe, your brother." Frank's voice was steady. "The mole in the Bureau made official channels too dangerous. So we went dark, kept gathering evidence, kept the case alive even when everyone else declared it closed. James died 3 months ago." Monroe's voice cracked just slightly. "Heart attack, at his desk. They said it was natural causes." "It wasn't." Elena heard herself speak before her brain approved the words. "My grandmother's last recipe was dated March 2024, 3 months ago. Instructions she left after she died, which means someone else wrote it. Someone who had access to her code. Someone who knew James Monroe was about to expose the mole." Monroe's face went white. "You're suggesting that Deputy Director Marcus Webb killed your brother to protect his own involvement?" "Yes." Frank pulled up another file, this one recent. "Webb appears in 17 transactions from 2010 to present. Bribes totaling $8 million, all paid by shell corporations traced back to Castellano. James discovered it 2 weeks before he died. Called me the night before his heart attack. Said he had proof. Said he was going to the Attorney General the next morning." The silence stretched taut as wire. Monroe looked at the files on her phone, then at the detectives watching from the doorway, then at Dante. "If what you're saying is true, if Webb is compromised, then this entire investigation is compromised. Anyone he brought in could be on Castellano's payroll." "Not everyone." A new voice cut through the tension. A detective Elena recognized from the news stepped forward, his badge identifying him as Lieutenant Ramirez. "I came in through the local precinct, not FBI channels. Monroe brought me in directly after the kidnapping. If you're saying Webb's dirty, that explains why he tried to block me from the scene. Claimed it was federal jurisdiction." Monroe's expression hardened. "Where is Webb now?" "Said he had to brief the director. Left 20 minutes ago." Ramirez checked his watch. "Should be at Federal Plaza by now, unless he went somewhere else." "He went to Castellano." Dante's voice was absolutely certain. "Told him we found the files. Told him we're bringing them to you. Which means Castellano knows he's out of time. Which means—" His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered on speaker. Vincent Castellano's voice filled the room, cultured and calm. "Mr. Valentino, I believe you have something that belongs to me. I have evidence of 30 years of corruption, murder, and racketeering. If that belonged to you, then yes." Dante's voice was ice. "Where's my mother?" "Safe, for now. Enjoying the view of the East River. Much like your father's friend Julia enjoyed it before she took her last swim." A pause waited with malice. "I'm prepared to offer a trade. Your mother for every copy of that evidence, every file, every photograph, the cookbook, the flash drive, all of it." Delivered to Pier 17 by midnight. You come alone. The woman comes with you. Elena's blood turned to ice. What woman? Elena Marino, Julia's granddaughter. The one who decoded the recipes. The one whose brother is currently enjoying the finest medical care money can buy at a facility in the Adirondacks. Castellano's voice turned to poison. Bring her, or I make a phone call and young Marco has a very unfortunate allergic reaction to his medication. Do we understand each other? Dante's face could have been carved from marble. We understand perfectly. Midnight, Pier 17. Elena and I will be there. Come armed and Carmela drowns immediately. Come with backup and she drowns. Come with anything except the evidence and the girl and she drowns. Castellano's laugh was dry, humorless. Your father tried to play hero once. We both know how that ended. Don't repeat his mistakes. The line went dead. Monroe moved immediately, barking orders to Ramirez and 3 other detectives whose names Elena didn't catch. I want tactical positioned within 2 blocks of Pier 17. Sniper teams on rooftops. Coast Guard on the river, but invisible. If Castellano sees 1 badge, 1 weapon, 1 hint of law enforcement, we lose our hostage and our case. Dante shook his head. He'll have counter-surveillance, spotters on every approach. The moment your people move into position, he'll know. Then what do you suggest? We do exactly what he expects. Elena and I walk into the trap, give him the evidence, get Carmela out, and trust that you'll move fast enough to arrest him before he can destroy what we're handing over. That's not a plan. That's faith in a system that's failed you repeatedly. Monroe's voice was harsh but not unkind. I won't send civilians into a hostage situation, especially not when one of those civilians is the granddaughter of my brother's partner. Elena stepped forward. With respect, Deputy Director, you don't get to send me anywhere. I choose to go. Because Castellano's right about one thing. He has my brother's life in his hands. And I won't risk Marco for evidence that'll take months to process through a court system Castellano owns half of. The evidence is worthless if you're dead. Then make sure we're not. Elena pulled the cookbook from her jacket, placed it on the table between them. This contains 87 documented crimes. But the real power isn't in the past, it's in the present. Castellano's still paying bribes, still corrupting officials, still running his empire. Which means if we can get him talking, get him admitting what he's done, we don't need the historical evidence. We need him on tape confessing to kidnapping, extortion, and conspiracy to murder. Monroe's eyes narrowed. You want to wire yourselves. Record the exchange. More than that. Dante pulled out his phone, opened an app Elena had never seen. I want to live stream it, not to law enforcement, to every news station in New York, every newspaper, every social media platform. Make it impossible to cover up. Make it so public that even the corrupt officials on his payroll can't make it disappear. Ramirez whistled low. That's insane. If he finds the wire, you're both dead. If we don't expose him tonight, we're dead anyway. He won't stop. He can't afford to. Dante's voice carried the weight of 25 years of grief finally finding purpose. My father tried to take him down quietly. Julia tried to build a case through proper channels. They both died because they played by rules Castellano never followed. So we break the rules. We take him down in full view of 8 million witnesses. We make him a monster too public to protect. Monroe stared at him for a long moment. Then she pulled out her own phone, started making calls. I need tech support at this location. Now. Full surveillance package. Wireless, encrypted. Something that can't be detected with a standard sweep. She covered the phone. You get one shot at this. If he finds the equipment, if he suspects anything, you abort. Get Carmela and run. Understand? Dante nodded. Elena felt like she was watching her life from outside her body again, agreeing to walk into an execution, trusting that somewhere between evidence and live streams and tactical teams, justice would prevail over a man who'd spent 30 years proving justice was a commodity he could buy. The next hour was a blur of preparation. FBI tech specialists arrived with equipment Elena couldn't begin to understand. Pinhead cameras disguised as buttons, microphones thinner than hair woven into jacket seams, broadcasting equipment that could stream HD video to 12 different platforms simultaneously, all of it controlled from a tablet Frank would monitor from 3 blocks away. Elena stood in the mansion's guest room letting a tech specialist wire her jacket while another tested audio levels. In the mirror, she looked like herself. Tired, terrified, ordinary. Nobody would look at her and see a woman about to broadcast a Mafia confession to the world, which was exactly the point. A knock on the door. Dante entered, similarly wired, his expression unreadable. The tech specialists left, giving them privacy Elena wasn't sure she wanted. "You don't have to do this," his voice was soft. "I can go alone, make the trade, disappear with my mother. Let the Bureau handle Castellano through proper channels." Elena adjusted her jacket, checking the hidden camera's angle in the mirror. "And Marco? You think Castellano lets him live once he has the evidence? Once we're out of the picture and can't testify? Frank will get to him first. Extract him before Castellano's people know we're gone. You have a lot of faith in a man who's been lying about his identity for 25 years. He's been protecting me for 25 years. There's a difference." Dante moved closer, his reflection appearing beside hers in the mirror. "Elena, what I said in the car about you staying behind, I meant it. This isn't your fight. Julia would want you safe. Nona would want me to finish what she started." Elena turned to face him directly. "You said it yourself. We're the most dangerous partnership in New York. The granddaughter of an FBI agent and the son of a Don. Together we end this." Something shifted in Dante's expression. Respect, recognition, maybe the beginning of trust that went deeper than transactions. "When this is over, when Castellano's in custody and your brother's safe and the evidence is public, what will you do? Cook, teach, build something clean?" Elena surprised herself by smiling. The kind of life Nona pretended to want when she was really documenting evil in recipe form. "I hope you get that." Dante's hand came up, hesitated, then tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture achingly gentle from a man who'd probably killed with those same hands. "You deserve peace. So do you. Men like me don't get peace. We get endings. If we're lucky, we get to choose them." He stepped back, the moment breaking. "But tonight I choose to fight, and I'm grateful you're fighting beside me." They left the mansion at 11:30. Monroe and her team were already in position, invisible in the industrial sprawl around Fulton Fish Market. Frank drove the tablet displaying 12 different streaming windows on his lap, all of them ready to go live the moment Elena gave the signal. The filing cabinet remained locked in FBI custody, being photographed and cataloged by agents Monroe swore weren't on Castellano's payroll. The Pier 17 warehouse loomed against the night sky, a rusted monument to industries that had moved on and left behind shells for predators to nest in. Dante and Elena got out of the car 3 blocks away, their cameras and microphones active but not broadcasting. Not yet. Not until they had Carmela in sight and Castellano talking. They walked toward the warehouse hand in hand, looking for all the world like a couple lost in the wrong neighborhood. Elena's heart hammered so hard she could taste it, coppery and sharp. Dante's grip was steady, anchoring her to reality when everything felt surreal. The warehouse door stood open. Light spilled from inside, industrial and harsh. They entered to find a space that had been cleared, crates pushed to the walls, revealing a concrete floor stained with God knew what. Carmela sat in a chair at the center, duct tape across her mouth, her hands bound behind her back. But her eyes were clear, furious, alive. Vincent Castellano stood beside her, flanked by 4 men who looked like they'd been born with guns in their hands. He was exactly as his photograph suggested, distinguished, almost grandfatherly, the kind of man who'd blend into any country club or charity gala. Only his eyes revealed the truth. Cold, calculating, empty of anything resembling mercy. "Mr. Valentino, Miss Marino, thank you for being punctual." His voice was the same cultured calm from the phone call. "I trust you brought what I requested." Dante held up a messenger bag. Every file, every photograph, the cookbook, Frank's flash drive, all of it. "And copies. There are no copies. You have my word." Castellano's laugh was dry as bones. Your word. Like your father's word that he'd keep my secrets. Like Julia's word that she was loyal to the family. Forgive me if I'm skeptical of Valentino promises. Elena's hand moved to her jacket pocket, the signal for Frank to start broadcasting. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. You killed my grandmother, drowned her in the East River because she wouldn't tell you where she hid the evidence. I did no such thing. Julia slipped while walking too close to the water. A tragic accident witnessed by no one, easily explained, quickly forgotten. Castellano's smile was a razor. Much like what's about to happen to you. Then why the trade? Why not just kill us and take the evidence? Dante's voice was pure ice. Because I'm a businessman, not a monster. I prefer clean transactions. You give me the evidence that threatens my livelihood. I give you your mother and let you walk away. Everyone wins. Everyone lives. No need for unnecessary violence. Except you've already made the call to Marco's facility. Already given the order to kill him once you have what you want. Elena watched Castellano's expression flicker, confirming her guess. Deputy Director Webb called you 2 hours ago. Told you we found the files. Told you Monroe's probably already moving tactical teams into position. So you need us to believe you'll let us go. Need us to hand over the evidence voluntarily. Because if you kill us first, if this turns into a shooting war, the evidence gets leaked and you lose everything. Castellano's pleasant mask slipped. Clever girl, just like your grandmother. Too clever for your own good. He pulled a gun from his jacket. Not rushed, not panicked, just efficient. The 4 men around him did the same, weapons trained on Dante and Elena with professional precision. Here's what's actually going to happen. You're going to give me that bag. I'm going to verify the contents. Then I'm going to shoot you both in the head and dump you in the river beside Carmela. By the time Monroe's people breach this warehouse, we'll be gone. The evidence will be gone. And the only witnesses will be fish. Dante didn't move. You're forgetting the live stream. Castellano frowned. What? For the last 3 minutes, every word you've said has been broadcast to 12 different platforms. Thousands of viewers. Growing exponentially. Dante's smile was savage. You just confessed to murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy on live television, in front of witnesses you can't threaten or buy or kill. Castellano's face went purple. He gestured sharply to one of his men, who pulled out a signal detector, swept it over Dante and Elena. The device screamed immediately, lights flashing red. Cameras, microphones, broadcasting equipment. You arrogant! Castellano raised his gun, aimed directly at Dante's chest. It doesn't matter. Dead men can't testify. Dead women can't decode recipes. By the time anyone organizes a response, I'll be in Brazil with 50 million in offshore accounts. The warehouse doors exploded inward. Not FBI tactical teams. Something worse, or better depending on perspective. News crews, 6 of them. Cameras rolling, lights blazing. Reporters shouting questions and streaming everything live to audiences that dwarfed whatever Frank's tablet was reaching. Castellano spun his men, confused their weapons, tracking multiple targets. And in that moment of chaos, Carmela Valentino, 72 years old, hands bound, mouth taped, threw herself sideways out of the chair, hit the concrete hard, rolled toward her son. Dante lunged forward, grabbed his mother, used his body as a shield. Elena dove behind a crate, her survival instincts finally overriding her paralysis. Gunfire erupted deafening in the enclosed space. Bullets sparked off metal, shattered concrete. Someone screamed, then cutting through the chaos, a voice amplified by megaphone. FBI, drop your weapons. The building is surrounded. Castellano's men looked to their boss, looked at the cameras still rolling, looked at the tactical lights appearing through every entrance. One by one they lowered their weapons, raised their hands. But Castellano didn't. He kept his gun trained on Dante, on Carmela, his face twisted with rage and desperation. You think this ends me? You think one night of cameras and confessions destroys 30 years of infrastructure? I own half the judges in this city. I own prosecutors, cops, politicians. I'll be out in 48 hours. And when I am, I'll finish what I started. No. Deputy Director Monroe walked through the smoke and chaos, her weapon drawn, her expression carved from granite. You won't. Because every judge you own, every cop, every prosecutor, they're all named in Julia Marino's evidence. They're all being arrested as we speak. Simultaneous raids coordinated across 3 boroughs. By sunrise, your entire network will be in custody. And you'll be in a cell where cameras watch 24 hours a day, and the only people you own are the ones who want you dead for getting them caught. Castellano's gun wavered. He looked at the news cameras, at the FBI agents pouring through doors, at Dante holding his mother while blood seeped from his shoulder, hit by shrapnel, not a direct shot. At Elena emerging from behind the crate, her camera still broadcasting, her eyes fierce with vindication. This isn't over. His voice was barely a whisper. Yes, it is. Elena's voice rang clear through the warehouse. My grandmother spent 15 years building this case. She died protecting it. But she also left me everything I needed to finish her work. And tonight we did. This is the ending she waited 25 years for. This is justice. Castellano pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. Elena's eyes tracked the detail she'd missed in the chaos. Lieutenant Ramirez crouched behind Castellano, having removed the magazine, while the old man monologued to cameras. The gun clicked empty. Useless. A symbol of power that evaporated the moment its mechanics failed. FBI agents swarmed Castellano, forcing him to the ground, securing his wrists with zip ties, while he screamed about lawyers and rights and conspiracies. But his voice was drowned out by the news crews, by the sirens, by the helicopter hovering overhead, with searchlights turning night into day. Elena found Dante still holding Carmela. His mother's tape removed her hands, freed both of them, crying. She approached slowly, giving them space for a reunion 25 years in the making. Carmela looked up, saw Elena, and reached out with trembling hands. Julia's girl. You finished it. You finished what she could not. Elena knelt beside them, her own tears finally falling. She did most of the work. I just turned the last page. No. Carmela's voice was surprisingly strong. You did what she always hoped someone would do. You chose to fight instead of run. You chose truth over safety. You chose to be brave when being small would have kept you alive. The old woman pulled Elena into an embrace that smelled of lavender and fear and survival. She would be so proud. Monroe approached her weapon, holstered, her expression somewhere between exhaustion and triumph. We've got 47 arrests confirmed. Webb was picked up trying to leave JFK, 3 judges in custody, 5 precinct captains, 2 city councilmen, and that's just the first wave. She looked at the bag Dante had dropped, still containing the evidence. We'll need you both to give statements, tonight, while everything's fresh. Dante struggled to his feet, wincing as he favored his injured shoulder. Whatever you need. And Marco, Elena's voice cracked on her brother's name. Frank got to him first. He's safe, already en route to a secure federal facility. You'll see him tomorrow. Monroe's expression softened just slightly. For tonight, you've done enough. The statements took 3 hours. Elena sat in an FBI mobile command center drinking terrible coffee while recounting the night's events for the recording. Through the window, she could see the warehouse surrounded by floodlights, evidence techs combing every inch, journalists creating a media circus that would dominate headlines for months. Dante was in the next vehicle over, getting his shoulder treated, his mother beside him. Every few minutes he'd look through the window and catch Elena's eye. A silent question. Still alive? Still okay? She'd nod. Still alive. Still okay. Still processing the fact that they'd survived. When Monroe finally released them, dawn was breaking over the East River, the same river where Julia Marino had drowned 25 years ago, where Carmela had almost died tonight, where justice had finally impossibly prevailed. Frank drove them back to the estate in silence. Carmela dozed against Dante's good shoulder. Elena stared out the window, watching the city wake up to news of the biggest corruption bust in New York history, watching her grandmother's sacrifice finally mean something. As they pulled through the gates, Frank cleared his throat. Monroe says the asset seizures will total over $2 billion. The FBI's Informant Compensation Fund is substantial for cases like this. You'll both be taken care of, financially, medically, however you need." Elena's throat tightened. "I don't want blood money." "It's not blood money, it's restitution. Payment for what you risked, what you survived." Frank met her eyes in the rearview mirror. "Julia would want you to take it, to build something good on the foundation she laid." 3 months later, Elena stood in the kitchen of Julia's Table, the restaurant that had been her grandmother's dream and was now hers. The space was small but perfect. Exposed brick. Open kitchen. 40 seats that filled every night with people who came for the food and stayed for the stories. Marco was the host, healthy and strong, greeting customers with charm that Elena recognized from their father. The treatments had worked. The specialists Frank connected them with had worked. For the first time in his life, her brother could breathe without machines, without fear, without wondering if each winter would be his last. The reviews were good. The crowds were growing. The peaceful life Elena had earned was actually happening. Most nights Dante came in around 9 after the dinner rush. Ordered the same thing, pasta alla carbonara, prepared exactly the way Carmela taught Elena. He'd sit at the corner table working through law school textbooks, preparing for a legitimate career that didn't involve threats or bribes or consequences measured in bodies. They didn't talk about the trial, which was ongoing. Didn't talk about Castellano's lawyers trying every procedural trick to suppress evidence. Didn't talk about the 47 defendants who'd already pleaded out the 3 who'd gone to trial and lost the estimated 500 more cases that would take years to prosecute. Instead, they talked about recipes. About whether basil really tasted better picked in the morning, about the difference between Parmigiano Reggiano and American Parmesan, about the way food could be memory and comfort and art all at once. Tonight, Elena brought his pasta to the table personally, sat down across from him without asking permission. "Carmela wants to know when you're bringing me to Sunday dinner." Dante looked up from his textbook, surprise flickering across his features. "She asks every week. I keep telling her we're not, that you and I aren't." "Aren't what?" Elena leaned forward. "Partners, allies. 2 people who survived hell together and are still figuring out what that means." "All of that." "Yes." He closed the textbook. "Elena, I'm a convicted felon on parole. I'll be paying restitution for the next 20 years. My family name is synonymous with corruption and violence. I have no business asking you for anything beyond the pasta you already provide. Good thing I'm not waiting to be asked." She stood up, moved to the kitchen, returned with a second plate, carbonara for herself. She sat back down, picked up her fork. "Your mother saved me a seat at her table. I'm accepting. You can come or not. That's your choice." Dante stared at her. Then slowly that rare smile appeared, the genuine one that made him look younger, lighter, free of ghosts. "You're terrifying. You know that." "I learned from the best. A woman who spent 15 years documenting evil, who saved a 6-year-old boy because he was worth saving, who left her granddaughter everything she needed to finish the fight." Elena took a bite of pasta, savored it, swallowed. "Nona's work is done. The rest is ours. And I've always been patient." Dante picked up his own fork. "Then I guess I'll see you at Sunday dinner." They ate in companionable silence, 2 people who'd been strangers 3 months ago and were now something that didn't have a name yet. Around them the restaurant buzzed with life, customers laughing, plates clattering, the smell of garlic and tomatoes and bread fresh from the oven. Through the window Elena could see the street where Nonna Julia used to walk, where she'd pretended to be ordinary while carrying extraordinary secrets, where she'd planted seeds of justice that took 25 years to bloom, but finally impossibly had. The work was finished, the debts were paid, and for the first time in either of their lives the future felt like a gift instead of a countdown. Elena reached across the table, her hand covering Dante's. He turned his palm up, laced their fingers together, and held on like a man who'd finally found something worth keeping. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, 2 people who'd chosen each other in violence were now choosing each other in peace, building something clean, building something good, building something that would last.